You can have your
Main event of the evening.
ready to race to you.
These days are
Hello and welcome to These Days Are Ours, a Happy Days podcast. I'm Peter.
And I'm Joe.
And today, you'll be discussing Season 6, Episode 6, Kid Stuff.
Okay, Peter, tell us what happens in Kid Stuff.
We open with Ralph and Potsy wearing sandwich boards and protesting Al because he won't pay their band more for performing.
Talk's cheap, and Al's cheaper.
Richie tries to convince them to go back to negotiations, citing the example of Henry Clay, the great compromiser. Rich, are you sure you want to cite a guy who compromised over slavery? Al comes out of the kitchen, carrying a picket sign that says, "Ignore them." Richie convinces him to reopen negotiations, but it goes south when Ralph tells Al to go suck an egg.
Oh yeah, well the same to you, negotiator.
Fonzie enters with a small boy wearing a matching jacket. He introduces him to Richie, Ralph, and Potsy as Bobby, the son of Fonzie's current flame Peggy. They get along great. Bobby calls Fonzie Champ, and Fonzie calls him Kimosabe.
Hey there, Kimosabe.
Hold it, Weber.
Yeah?
I call him Kimosabe.
And when Bobby wants to hit the jukebox, Fonzie discreetly hits it and lets Bobby think he did it. Fonzie and Bobby sit down, with Richie right as Peggy arrives. Fonzie says he and Bobby have a fabamundo time together, though he corrects it to fabulous for Peggy's sake. Then he says that he has something special planned for tonight. He, Peggy, and Bobby are going to an amusement park. As the three of them leave, with Fonzie giving Bobby a piggyback ride, Potsy tags along. Fonzie tells Peggy not to worry. He usually gets lost on the way. That night, Howard and Marion arrive back from an auction. Marion's first, and she bid on and won a rather ugly lamp that she is nevertheless happy with. Howard is not.
It's going to give the living room a whole new look.
It already has.
Joni arrives with a big scoop from Jenny Piccolo. Fonzie is secretly married, with a kid and everything. Marion is shocked that Fonzie never told them, while Howard is doubtful of Jenny Piccolo's accuracy.
Scoop-wise, Jenny Piccolo is better than a gossip columnist.
And just about as accurate.
When Fonzie enters, Marion happily tells him they know his secret. Once Fonzie gets clarification as to which secret they're talking about, he says the only problem is that it's not true. Joni goes to squelch some rumors, while Marion asks about Peggy's husband. According to Fonzie, he and Peggy are separated on account of him abandoning her. He went out for ice cream 2 years ago and never came back.
Gone like a bum, Splitsville, separated.
Fonzie came down to ask for parenting advice. See, Bobby is upstairs in Fonzie's apartment playing and asking questions, like, where do babies come from? Neither Howard nor Marion have a good answer, so Fonzie decides to just make popcorn every time Bobby has a difficult question. Later in Fonzie's apartment, he and Bobby are playing with an erector set. Their bridge is finished, and all they need is a boat to go through. Bobby asks Fonzie to be the boat, and once Fonzie makes sure that nobody is there who can see him and all the shades are drawn, does indeed play the boat, with a toot-toot and everything.
Toot, toot.
How's that, huh?
It was great, except for the toot.
Bobby says he bets Fonzie built lots of bridges with his father, and Fonzie says he never built nothing with his father. Much like Bobby, his old man ran out on him when he was just a little tyke. Fonzie doesn't miss his dad, and he's never going to let Bobby miss his dad, because they've got each other now. The next night, Peggy shows up at Fonzie's apartment without Bobby, who is with a babysitter. She's not there for romantic reasons, like Fonzie assumes. She's there to tell him that she and her husband Robert are getting back together.
Robert, my husband, and I, we're getting back together.
Well, he finally brought back the ice cream. Little mushy after 3 years.
Fonzie is doubtful that Robert has changed, but Peggy insists that he has. He wants another chance, and so does Peggy, who still loves him. Fonzie says he's happy for them, and suggests she bring Bobby up one last time so they can celebrate. Then Peggy says Fonzie can't see Bobby anymore. He's got to get to know his father, and he can't do that if he's spending all his time with Fonzie. Peggy leaves, and Fonzie shouts after her that he can't spend all his life playing with some little kid. Then he kicks the bridge he and Bobby built, and sadly hangs up a picture Bobby drew of him. The next night at the Cunningham house, Richie comes downstairs to show his parents his 12-and-a-half-day-old mustache. Said mustache is barely visible.
Oh, yes. The light just hit it.
Fonzie bursts in, wearing his garage uniform and rambling about forming a posse. Peggy just called him. Bobby has run away from home. Marion tells him to calm down, but Fonzie can't. Not until he hears a voice from outside calling him Champ. Sure enough, it's Bobby. Fonzie is furious, until Bobby reveals he's been looking for Fonzie because he missed him. Robert is boring. He can't even build a bridge. Fonzie, at Howard's suggestion, calls up Peggy to let her know that her son is safe and sound, while Richie, Howard, and Marion talk to Bobby. Richie suggests that Bobby's dad can be his friend, like Fonzie is. Sure, he left for a while, but he's back now. Howard says Bobby should give him a chance, and Bobby, rightfully, asks why. Richie delivers a short ramble about the bond between father and son that goes right over Bobby and Howard's heads.
Throughout the ages, the bond between father and son has always been one of mutual need and respect. Understand?
Fonzie finishes his phone call with Peggy and takes Bobby home, promising to let him come by the garage tomorrow. Marion finds the whole thing sweet, until Howard says Fonzie's not supposed to see Bobby anymore. Marion despondently compares it to As the World Turns, and tries to recall plot details while Howard and Richie make cocoa.
The woman had a little boy just his age, then she fell in love. No, or was it as the edge of night?
Later that night, Richie visits Fonzie in his apartment. It's about Bobby. He thinks Fonzie is the greatest, so how does his father stand a chance with Fonzie around? Fonzie's great at goofing around, but Bobby doesn't need a playmate. He needs his father. Fonzie points out that his father ran out on him when he was a toddler. Richie accuses Fonzie of using Bobby as a way to get back at his own father, who ran out on Fonzie when he was a toddler. But Bobby's father came back, and Bobby can't have two fathers. Fonzie tells him to leave, and Richie does. After telling Fonzie to think about who he's getting even with, Bobby's father for coming back, or his father for leaving. Then Fonzie sadly stares at a photograph as he tells himself he doesn't need a family. The next day at Arnold's, Fonzie and Bobby are having a soda drinking contest as a man arrives, Bobby's father, Robert.
You must be Fonzie. Hi, I'm Bobby's father.
Right.
He's here to take Bobby to the park alongside Peggy, but both Bobby and Fonzie rebuff him. When Robert says that he's Bobby's father, and they're a family now, Bobby says Fonzie is more like his father, and he doesn't need a family. Robert tries to pull him away, but Bobby resists. Fonzie stands up and starts a fight with Robert, pushing him until Robert is about to fight back. Then Fonzie's tune changes. He shrinks away and begs Robert not to hit him.
All right, don't hit me. There's no need for violence here. You call my bluff, you're cool.
He tells Bobby maybe he'll catch him later, and Bobby takes off his jacket and says he never wants to see Fonzie again. He's no champ. He's a scaredy cat. Then he goes to the park with Robert, who he calls Dad. Robert gives Fonzie a look, and Fonzie gives him a thumbs up. As Fonzie hugs Bobby's jacket and wonders if the kid will remember him, Richie assures him that Bobby will remember him. Then they go to the bowling alley. Fonzie more for the girl pin boys than the actual bowling.
The Fonz does not bowl.
Girl pin boys.
The Fonz bowl.
Later, the strike is back on at Arnold's, with Richie now striking alongside Ralph and Potsy because of management's inability to compromise on even the smallest things. Richie gives a speech.
For the past 3 years, we've stood on this very stage playing rock and roll the best we knew how. And now we need your help.
Leading the teens there and demanding live music. Al, from the kitchen, says if they want live music, they've got it, and he comes out playing a ukulele. Then the teens all start dancing, with Richie, Potsy, and Ralph singing along with Al.
Thank you, Peter. That was Kid Stuff, which first aired back on October 10th, 1978. That night, Happy Days was the lead into a new episode of Laverne and Shirley, in which the girls are contestants on a game show.
You know something? I think I found a contestant here. How about you?
CBS had a new episode of The Paper Chase in which our hero, law student James Hart, volunteers to take part in a prison legal assistance program and gets a little more than he bargained for. NBC was airing the first game of the 1978 World Series between the New York Yankees and the Los Angeles Dodgers. The Dodgers won that night, but lost the series 4-2. So, Peter, what are you watching?
I'm intrigued by the description of The Paper Chase, for once. I want to see if it's an even-handed portrayal of the prison system or if it's just criminals are criminals and you should never try to help them.
I think in our household, we probably would have been watching the first game of the 1978 World Series, but I might have just gone out and taken a walk that night. Kid Stuff was directed by Jerry Paris and was written by Fred Fox Jr. The most recent of Fred's episodes that we covered was Westward Ho, Part 3. As for guest stars this week, we have John Waldron as Bobby Clark. John was a moderately successful child actor of the late 1970s. In the span of about 3 years, he appeared in the Buddy Holly story and the NBC miniseries Once an Eagle, plus an ABC after-school special called The Terrible Secret.
On the next ABC after-school special, a lonely rainy night turns into a nightmare for Bobby and becomes The Terrible Secret.
Best of all, he was in the made-for-TV movie Captain America 2, Death Too Soon, with our pal Reb Brown.
Oh, wow.
So, Peter, what did you think of John Waldron as Bobby Clark?
He was fine. I don't think he had any of the major pitfalls of child actors. He was cute without being cutesy. I thought that his little tantrum as Robert was dragging him away inside Arnold's near the end was very realistic. Yeah, that is how a kid would throw a tantrum.
I guess John was okay as Bobby Clark. I would not call him a brilliant child actor. Most child actors just kind of yell their lines in a monotone. That's kind of what John does for most of this. There are some moments where he's a more realistic kid. A lot of the emotional real weight of the story hangs on the Bobby Clark character and his reaction to things. I don't know if he's conveying the sadness that's going on.
Or if he's just bored.
Yeah, I'm very hesitant to criticize child actors because they're probably not choosing this life for themselves. It's probably something that their parents chose for them, dragging them to auditions and stuff. So I'm sure he's doing his best under the circumstances. We also have Bruce Weitz as Robert Clark, a very busy character actor from Connecticut. Robert is best known as Sergeant Mick Belker on Hill Street Blues.
Undercover is different because if you're good at it, most times nobody else knows the inside of what you did.
Before Happy Days, he'd been on Columbo and Quincy, and he appeared in a CBS special called Henry Winkler Meets William Shakespeare.
Oh my God.
After Hill Street Blues, you might have seen him on Mama's Boy, Anything But Love, ER, Judging Amy, General Hospital, and The Young and the Restless. He's also done a fair amount of cartoon voiceover work in shows like Superman the Animated Series, Batman the Animated Series, and Real Monsters. So what did you think of Bruce Weitz as Robert Clark?
I do not like his character, which is not the actor's fault. He does an all right job, but man, I just think he's an asshole. There's a part during his one scene where he tells Bobby that he's his father.
Bobby, I'm your father.
And the implication is that Bobby owes him respect because of that, except you abandoned him when he was a toddler.
I've abandoned my boy!
You do not get to come back now and claim this familial connection that you abandoned in the first place, you jackass.
I would say that Bruce has been given a pretty impossible part to play here because I don't know how you play this character so that all of a sudden we are sympathizing with this guy who walked out on his wife and kid. I guess Bruce plays it as well as anybody could under those circumstances.
He does his best, so A for effort, buddy.
What's not helping him, though, is the sweater that they put him in, this banana yellow V-neck sweater.
I didn't want to talk about it until we got to fashion, but it's ridiculous. It is absurd looking.
We also have Karen Austin as Peggy Clark, a very in-demand actress from West Virginia. Karen was near the beginning of her career when she appeared on Happy Days. She later had recurring roles on Night Court, Staying Elsewhere, Hill Street Blues, L.A. Law, The Trials of Rosie O'Neill, Live Shot, Murder One, and Whole Day Down. Karen's films include Summer Rental with John Candy.
The landlord should pay for all repairs.
I can't reach him. They say he's in intensive care.
The Rum Diary and Jagged Edge. You might have also seen her on Star Trek Voyager, Desperate Housewives, CSI Miami, Battlestar Galactica, and many, many more. What did you think of Karen Austin as Peggy Clark?
She is so pretty. She comes across as this very calm, level-headed person. I really liked the part where Fonzie says Fabamundo, and then she gives him this little look, and he corrects it to fabulous, because he's spending time with her son, and she wants her son to not constantly be speaking in slang, because he idolizes Fonzie and is trying to be like him. I like that. I thought that was a very nice little detail.
I think Karen Austin actually gives an excellent performance as a slightly underwritten character. We never really get a sense of who Peggy Clark is or what her life is really like, but Karen Austin plays it as well as anybody could. I think she does lend an air of realism to this episode. As for songs this week, it was mostly replacement music in my copy, including that fake classic, I Came Here to Rock and Roll.
In my version, when Fonzie hit the jukebox, it played Yakety Yak by the Coasters.
See, that would have been so much better, but we also get Ain't She Sweet. It's performed by Al Molinaro with Ron Howard, Anson Williams, and Donnie Most. It's a popular song written in 1927 by Milton Ager and Jack Yellen. That's the same exact team that wrote Happy Days Are Here Again, the song that ultimately gave Happy Days its title.
Oh, neat.
So, as for cultural and historical references this week, the phrase kid stuff is a throwback to a 1960s ad campaign for Vitalis Hair Tonic, in which football player Bart Starr disparagingly refers to Brill Cream as that greasy kid stuff.
Sam, you still using that greasy kid stuff on your hair? Yeah, what do you use? Vitalis. Keeps your hair neat all day without grease.
The catchphrase caught on, even becoming the title of a top 40 hit for Janie Grant.
Are you still using that greasy kid stuff? That icky, sticky, ooey gooey greasy kid stuff.
For a while, you could actually buy a hair product called Greasy Kid Stuff.
Huh.
In the parking lot at Arnold's, there are posters for some classic Paramount films. We see The Tin Star, a 1957 Western starring Henry Fonda and Anthony Perkins, and Three Ring Circus, a 1954 comedy starring Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis.
They're higher than ever, wilder than ever, more hilarious than ever, because only the new screen marvel of this division could encompass all the yells and thrills and technicolorful spectacle when Dean and Jerry take over the circuit.
Personally, anything with circus in the title and Jerry Lewis, that's a combination that scares me a little bit. We have to talk a little bit about Henry Clay, the great compromiser.
Well, you remember Henry Clay, right? The great compromiser?
Oh, right. He died a pauper.
Henry was an American lawyer turned politician of the early to mid-1800s. In his very long career, he served as Speaker of the House, Secretary of State under John Quincy Adams, and finally Senator from Kentucky. He tried to wrangle a nomination for the presidency, but it never happened. Contrary to this episode, I don't see any evidence that he died in poverty. He served in the Senate until his health prevented him from continuing, and he was so well respected when he died that he was the first person to lie in state at the U.S. Capitol Rotunda. What did you think about that joke about him dying as a pauper?
I think it's just a sign that Potsy has no idea what he's talking about.
Fonz says that Bobby is better than Shakespeare because he rhymes.
Put it in your pocket and don't let nobody hock it.
Well, playwright and poet William Shakespeare is mostly known for his use of unrhymed iambic pentameter, aka blank verse. There are numerous rhyming couplets throughout his plays, and Shakespeare uses traditional rhyme schemes in his sonnets as well. So Shakespeare sometimes rhymes.
Yeah.
Fonz consistently refers to Bobby as Kimosabe throughout this episode.
Kimosabe! Hey out there, Kimosabe!
This was the term that the fictional Native American character Tonto used for his friend the Lone Ranger, starting in the 1930s on their radio show. The term was coined by Jim Jewell, who directed that radio show and whose father-in-law ran a boys' camp called Camp Kimosabe in Michigan. It comes from an Ojibwa and Potawatomi word Gimuzabe that literally means he who looks out in secret. In the context of the Lone Ranger, it means trusty scout or faithful friend. And we hear Kimosabe like 100 times in this episode.
You could make a drinking game out of it.
But you'd be dead of alcohol poisoning by the end of this episode. Fonzie refers to Potsy and Ralph as Huey and Dewey, along with their brother Louie. These three cartoon ducks debuted in their Uncle Donald Duck's newspaper comic in 1937. They made the jump to animation in 1938, and they've been multimedia stars ever since.
And they were referenced in a previous episode where we found out that the Hooper triplets once dressed as sexy versions of these duck children for Fonzie. Oh man, that was such a weird one-off thing that we've become obsessed with.
Fonz says that he's going to take Bobby and Peggy, and yes, those are the names from King of the Hill.
I mean, you got my wife Peggy, and she's real smart. And I'm real proud of my boy Bobby because because he's my boy.
To an amusement park. Milwaukee actually had a lot of amusement parks in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, several of them sponsored by the local breweries like Pabst Park, but they mostly died out in the 1910s. By the time of this episode, circa the early 1960s, Fonzie's best bet would have been the Muskego Beach Amusement Park, which changed its name to Dandelion Amusement Park and finally closed in 1977. Jenny Piccolo supposedly knew about Liz and Eddie before Debbie did. In one of the great celebrity scandals of the 1950s, American singer Eddie Fisher, father of Carrie, cheated on his wife of 4 years, actress Debbie Reynolds, with actress Elizabeth Taylor. In 1959, Eddie divorced Debbie, married Liz. That marriage lasted until 1964. Eddie's career never really recovered from the scandal, though he did marry actress Connie Stevens a few years later. That marriage also did not last. As boring as all this sounds, this was a huge deal in the 1950s and 60s.
Oh yeah, I imagine it was the Kim-Kanye split of its day.
Erector sets are all through this episode. Erector sets, which are metal toy construction sets, have been sold since 1913. Unlike such wooden construction toys as Lincoln Logs or Tinker Toys, they can be used to make both static and moving structures. Eventually, motors were added.
No, I don't usually think of it as a toy.
The all-new Gilbert Erector set.
It's more like a whole world, I guess. You know what I mean.
Fonz mentions King Kong. The giant gorilla debuted in a 1933 film starring Fay Wray and directed by Marion C. Cooper and Ernest B. Schoedsack. Marion's newspaper carries a full-page ad for something called Furniture Warehouse. I couldn't find a business with that exact name in Milwaukee, but there is one in Racine, Wisconsin, about 30 miles south. Marion references a number of soap operas.
This whole thing reminds me of As the World Turns.
Set in Oakdale, Illinois, As the World Turns debuted in 1956, and it eventually ran for 54 years. On CBS, that's 13,858 episodes, and we're reviewing every last one of them in a podcast that we are starting after we get through all of Happy Days, so stay tuned for that.
Stay tuned to listen to us go even more insane than we already have.
No, or was it As the Edge of Night?
The Edge of Night was a soap opera with a mystery crime angle. It aired on CBS from 1956 to 1975, and then on ABC from 1975 to 1984. I remember it mostly for being parodied on The Tonight Show as The Edge of Wetness.
The Edge of Wetness.
The Secret Storm was another CBS soap opera. It aired from 1954 to 1974 and centered around the socially prominent Ames family. I've never actually been a big soap opera viewer. My sister watched a few of them when she was in high school, but I never got into them.
They never really interested me as a child, and I didn't have any adults who watched them in my life to introduce me to them.
The scene in which Fonzie feigns cowardice so that Bobby will no longer admire him is clearly, in my opinion, borrowed or ripped off from the classic 1938 movie Angels with Dirty Faces, starring James Cagney. If this episode causes people to seek out that film, then it did some good. Cagney portrays a tough-talking gangster who pleads for his life on death row specifically so that the kids from his old neighborhood will stop idolizing him.
I don't want to die, oh, please. I don't want to die, oh, please. Don't make me burn out.
Fonzie and the gang would do well to check out a bowling alley with female pin setters while they still can. During the 1960s and 1970s, automatic pin setting machines became the norm, and pin setters across America were put out of work, thanks to the Brunswick Company.
Thanks a lot, Brunswick Company.
Other observations this week, I found this out accidentally. In France, this episode was known as Fonzarelli Jr.
Cute.
To me, the lettering on Potsy and Ralph's protest signs is far too neat. It was obviously produced by professional prop makers.
And you just know that they both have terrible handwriting.
So when the stage is set up at Arnold's, the jukebox goes where the pinball machine usually is. And I guess the pinball machine goes into storage somewhere. Maybe they keep it in the girls' bathroom or something.
Maybe. I mean, if Fonzie's office is in the men's room, you don't want to make him mad.
One serious question I have about this story is whether Fonzie has any genuine interest in Peggy or whether he's just using her to get to Bobby, which, if it's true, is really creepy.
I mean, I assume that he does. He seems pretty affectionate with her. I think that Bobby is just an added benefit. That's a really weird way to phrase it, but you get what I mean. He gets to be with Peggy, and he also gets to be part of the family, which is something that appeals to him.
But he spends way more time with Bobby than he ever does with Peggy.
Well, yeah, but that's because they're the focus of the episode, and we can assume that he's been involved with Peggy for some time before the episode starts, and they've probably spent lots of time off screen together.
Doing your mom, doing your mom. You know we straight doing your mom.
That's what I believe, and I'm sticking to it.
In a way, Fonzie is also sort of using Bobby, too, as a way of getting back at his father.
Fonzie does not make good decisions.
At this episode, I thought was evidence that maybe Fonzie needs some professional help. He would never seek it out, but I think maybe they could help him to talk to somebody. Now, the studio audience must have been really hot that night because Marion Ross, Tom Bosley, and Aaron Moran all get rounds of applause when they enter, which I thought was really nice.
Well, they deserve.
I have another serious question here. Why is Peggy leaving Bobby with Fonzie for such long amounts of time? At first, I thought she was using Fonz as a babysitter, but then she mentions having a babysitter. So what's going on there?
Well, maybe she was using him as a babysitter until she got back together with Robert.
Okay, so...
And then it becomes like, well, I can't leave my son with my ex-boyfriend now that I'm a married woman again.
Okay, I will buy that explanation. The Happy Days writers must have been very enamored of this story since the same basic thing happens to Fonzie over the course of season 10. Do you think they were thinking of this story when they wrote the long story arc about Fonzie with Ashley Pfister and Heather Pfister?
Potentially, yes. That being said, spoilers for season 10, but it ends when Ashley's husband and Heather's father comes back. So it has pretty much the exact same resolution of, okay, their original male member of the family is back, so now I have no place here.
It just seems weird for the same thing to happen to Fonzie twice.
How can the same shit happen to the same guy twice?
At the same time, it does establish that Fonzie would like to be a father, I think, and that's going to be very important later on in the series.
Okay, so that photograph that Fonzie digs out of the dresser drawer, what do you think it's a picture of? Is it his dad?
Based on the context, I would assume it's a picture of his dad.
But then when his actual dad shows up, he doesn't recognize him, so maybe he's changed his appearance that much over the years? Or maybe...
I guess so. Maybe it's like a really fuzzy photograph. You can see his basic outline, but his face looks really out of focus.
Okay, I guess I'll have to buy that explanation as well.
It's a photo of his dad, but a really crappy one.
And ultimately, Fonzie has to debase himself in public to get out of the situation, but he brought it on himself. He has several opportunities to get out of this gracefully that he does not take.
Well, yeah, because Fonzie does not do the easy thing. He does the most dramatic thing.
So, Peter, I will ask, were there any outstanding Happy Days fashions in this episode?
I love the outfit that Peggy was wearing at the beginning. She's wearing this really nice blue blouse and this flowy gray skirt, and she has a sweater over her shoulders. It's around her shoulders, but her arms aren't through it, and it just looks amazing. It looks so stylish, and she looks like a really fashion-forward school teacher. I love it.
Did you have any other observations that you wanted to make about kid stuff?
I really hated how everyone kept acting like Bobby owes Robert something just because Robert is his father and he came back. He abandoned Bobby when Bobby might have been too young to form memories. Who is this man to Bobby? He is nobody. He does not owe him anything. He does not owe him respect. He does not owe him love. It just bothered me so much. Even if Robert is part of Bobby's life now, Robert has to accept that Bobby might not trust him for a long, long time, maybe even ever. And if he was really sorry about leaving Bobby, then surely he would understand that, right?
We and the child are supposed to forgive him instantly. I don't know how you write that. I don't know how you play it.
I think it's possible, but I don't think it's possible in a 30-minute long episode of television.
Exactly. We have such a compressed timeline on Happy Days that sometimes stories like this advance way too quickly. I have to ask that age-old timeless question, was this episode any good?
There were a lot of parts of it that I like, but generally I think this episode was a downer, and not even in a very good way. The ending tag was a weird tonal shift because it's right after Fonzie has had his heart crushed. We're right back to wacky sitcom hijinks, and really weird ones at that. Al comes out of the kitchen and he's playing the ukulele and all the teenagers start dancing and the band starts singing along. I don't get it.
I don't understand the B-plot of this episode at all. They never make it clear what the band actually wanted or why Al is refusing to compromise on anything. I think the B-plot was just a complete afterthought that they didn't even work on. Overall, kid stuff is not my kind of episode. It's not what I tune into Happy Days for. I understand that occasionally they have to do more emotionally resonant episodes, and I think it actually is a pretty good acting showcase for Henry Winkler, but this didn't work for me. It's not a fun episode, and it's not dramatic in a way that engaged my sympathies or engaged my attention. So Kid Stuff, unfortunately, is the third episode of Happy Days in a row that I wouldn't really recommend after Fonzie's blindness and Casanova Cunningham.
We've had 3 bummers in a row. I have to wonder what was going on in the writer's room at the time that we were getting all of these bummers. After Westward Ho, were they just like, okay, now that the fun is out of the way, let's do some real sad stuff.
In a way, they were trying to reset the show after Westward Ho because Westward Ho is so over the top and so silly. They were like, well, let's bring the show back down to earth. I think they're way overdoing it. The only thing that I really think is of value in this episode is that we get some insight into Fonzie's character. And this is something that will continue throughout the other seasons of Happy Days toward him eventually becoming a father. We find out about things in Fonzie's past that continue to haunt him and continue to motivate him as an adult. And that will affect the rest of his storylines on Happy Days. But again, I got to say no thank you, Happy Days, to this one. So, Peter, where can people keep up with us and find out about all the wonderful things that we are doing?
Listeners can follow us on Twitter at Fonzie Podcast. They can follow me on Twitter at Peter Wolfranc. That's PeterVulfranc.
And they can follow me on Twitter at Joe_A_Blevins. They can find this podcast online at thesedaysaroours.libsyn.com. And they can email us with questions, comments, and concerns at thesedaysaroourspodcast@gmail.com. So, Peter, what do we have on the docket for next week?
Next week, Joni has a birthday party, and things don't go exactly according to plan in Sweet 16. And God, I hope this one is comparatively happier.
It sounds like it. There's a party and everything. So, see you later, alligator.
In a while, crocodile.
There she is, that's what keeps me up at night. Oh gee whiz, that's why I can't eat a bite. Those flaming eyes, that flaming youth. Oh mister, oh sister, tell me the truth. Now ain't she sweet, see her coming down the street. I ask you confidentially, ain't she sweet?
I've abandoned my boy!